Hello there, this is James of Scrofty News 1978, and the Ghost of Watcher Azazel has been much more restless than usual lately, insisting that I review the 2014 horror movie, in inverted commas, It Follows, because he claimed that it is a metaphor for rape survivors' trauma. And yes, although I'm only truly getting the subtext of the film now as I look back on it to write this review, although the sex between Jay and Jeff was consensual, which puts a huge dent in the entire premise of the movie, the fact that the demon, ghost, or whatever it is, literally follows you everywhere you go, that you can't escape it for long, no matter how far you travel or how many other people you have sex with, that no one else can see it, so they have to have faith that you are telling the truth. It's not exactly subtle or overburdened with complexity, although actually the more that I think about it, the more it becomes apparent, at least to me, that this film is a metaphor for survivors' trauma in general, not merely the trauma of those who've survived rape or sexual assault. And actually this makes much more sense, with only the fact that sex is the mechanism around which the entire plot revolves, naturally causing everyone to focus on that alone. Either way though, going back to the beginning, because I was getting ahead of myself there, after the traditional, if not mandatory, introduction in which an entirely unrelated character is brutally murdered in order to set the scene, after 13 or 14 more long and unbelievably tedious minutes of introducing the characters, the premise, and so forth, Jeff, who is going under the assumed name of Hugh at this point in the film, has sex with the protagonist Jay. All is well, and she's waxing poetic about freedom in the back of the car, when Jeff suddenly chloroforms her, takes her to the abandoned ruins of a building in the middle of nowhere, ties her to a wheelchair, and when she wakes up, tells her that it will follow her now. That he certainly didn't want to do this, but the only way to save himself, if only for a little while, was to have sex with someone else. Anyone else, implying someone of the opposite sex, heteronormativity for the win, so that it would follow her instead, explaining everything that he knows and giving advice on how to survive, such as warning Jay to never be in a place that doesn't have more than one exit. Wait, is that advice or a fucking riddle? Oh, you meant never be in a place that only has one exit. Well, why didn't you just say that to begin with, Edward Nygma? Warning Jay that if it kills her, then it'll come back and try to kill him again, and then continue on down the line, back to whoever started this, indicating that, as I mentioned before, you can't simply pass it on to someone else and then wash your hands of it, because when Jay and her friends finally find and confront Jeff later in the movie, he is still terrified and leaping at the sight of his own shadow. During the film, in fact, I did think long and hard about whether the plot was intended to be a metaphor for the cycle of abuse, because seriously, nothing within the movie itself was engaging enough to hold my interest for more than a few minutes at a time, with the survivors trying to overcome their trauma by abusing others. But once again though, while that makes sense out of context, it utterly fails to work within the context of the movie, because the actions and the reactions of the characters do not reflect that at all. Indeed, while the Wikipedia page states that the film received widespread critical acclaim, my personal opinion is that the writer-director Robert Mitchell needed to go back and write at least several more drafts of the script before he even thought about filming, because to be perfectly honest, what isn't painfully cliched in this film is unexplained, what isn't left unexplained is assumed, and what is assumed makes no fucking sense of any kind. For example, leaving aside the fact that Jeff went to all of the trouble of renting a house under an alias and seducing a girl he didn't know instead of just having sex with a sex worker, when exactly did we establish that the creature, or whatever it was, is vulnerable to water or electricity, never mind both? Yes, the fact that the first time we see Jay, she's getting into a swimming pool, makes the final confrontation synergistic, but still, from where in the name of the great holy donkey did her friends pull the plan to go to the old municipal swimming pool and take every electrical item they could carry with which to electrocute the thing? What made them think it would be vulnerable to electricity or water in the first place, and where the fuck did they get the necessary miles of extension cords? Beyond the vast and gaping plot chasms, in fact, as you may have figured out for yourself by now, the entire premise is merely a cross between the chainmail-style curse of The Ring and the invisible creature that hunts you down and kills you no matter where you run to or try to hide, of that equally plot-hole-ridden Doctor Who episode, Mummy on the Orient Express. And to cap it all off, this movie continues the proud tradition of being either too lazy or too uncreative to explain anything about the supernatural force in question, what it was, where it came from, and so forth, and instead relying entirely on abusing the cliched conceit that it's scarier if it's unexplained as a crutch. In fact, the most original things about this film are that young people have sex in order to avoid being murdered, and a group of them went out to an isolated house in the middle of nowhere and didn't all get brutally murdered one by one. So in conclusion, in fact, although It Follows was obviously trying to do something genuinely insightful and creative, portraying survivors' trauma in this fashion, at the risk of offending my good friend Alex Wiley, I'm afraid that my opinion of this movie as a whole is similar to my opinion of the second and third vignettes in his own movie, Hickory Dickory Dock, in that while both were based on good ideas and could have worked if only they'd been scripted better and taken more time to actually explain things, the fact that they were both so hopelessly derivative and poorly executed means that the final result of both films was simply a hot mess.